Okay, lesson 5 of stage 3 of the Power Playbook community. Welcome. Today we're going to be going through stretching, mobility, and strength foundations, and how those enable the body for progression. When we say progression, we mean going from whatever state you're at now to this concept called progressive overload, right? So you're constantly challenging your body as you grow. So if you become stronger, you don't want to just keep using the same old light weight. You got to increase the weight. You got to increase the intensity of the workout, the duration of the workout, whatever it is. But you can't go through that if your ability to, like if you're hitting squat, you got to be mobile enough to hit that deep enough stretch for it to be effective. Or you got to make sure that your shoulders are in check and that they are also progressing, like the joints, the rotator cuffs are also progressing to be able to withstand the loads under which you're placing your body, right? So this is foundational stuff. We're going to get into the actual regimen kind of thing next lesson. But up until this point, just as we talked about body mechanics in the previous lesson, mobility, stretching, they're absolutely foundational for strength foundations. We'll get into an intro here in a second. So overview, we're going to have an introduction about why this is important. We're going to talk about stretching basics and benefits, mobility and joint health, body weight exercising as a base, and then some core body weight exercises. We're including those because this is like the final lesson before we start talking about, how to actually get in the gym and start some real training regimens to help yourself get larger, faster, stronger, leaner, whatever it is your goal is, or a combo of all of them. But before you do that, you got to kind of prime the body. First, by your understanding of muscle mechanics, mobility and joint health, stretching, and then the end of this lesson is going to give you an opportunity to introduce some exercises you can do to prepare yourself and also to gauge like where it is you stand, so that you don't just show up on your first day in the gym and be like, maybe I can lift 300 pounds on this because I saw somebody built similar to me that can do it, and then you end up hurting yourself, right? So we're going to introduce some bodyweight stuff, have you guys get going on that, and that way you can gauge where it is you stand currently and prepare yourself better. So that said, introduction, why is this important? It's a key component for beginner, mostly because over time, it's great to like build yourself, and if you get into like the bodybuilding channel of the fitness industry, of your fitness journey, this is especially a problem. Like people will they'll start training super heavily out the gate. They start seeing some size put on, but they did not prioritize joint mobility or the like flexibility. So they're constantly stiff, and it starts causing problems with lower back pain. And then sometimes it can lead to like tearing of the muscles, because if you're not actively ensuring that your joints, if you're not working on mobility just as you would to work to build a muscle, a lot of times they don't progress as fast as the muscle does, and then you end up trying to load up the muscle so that you can continue to challenge the muscle. But what you fail to understand is that your joints are still not like able you know to sustain that kind of load, and that's kind of a rare thing to have happen, but it does happen. Especially because as you're training, generally your joints have to move anyway, so they are worked. But it's important to, if you want to achieve proper range of motion for all activities you do in the gym, that you work on mobility, because mobility as a definition is like your body's ability to like move. It's like, are you mobile? Like is your shoulder mobile enough to like put your shoulders in the proper position for a certain exercise, for a specific example. But that's why it's important, because over time, you got to prioritize longevity. You can't just prioritize short-term goals of being huge or whatever it is you want to do, because if that's all you cared about, you're going to end up hurting yourself or putting yourself in a worse off position down the line, when you could have just been working on these things from the beginning, right? So we're preventing injury. We're building functional strength, aesthetic training foundations, just as foundational as the previous lesson we talked about, where we are understanding muscle mechanics. So too, as far as importance is your stretching and mobility exercises. So it just prepares the body for further progression, as we kind of mentioned. But that said, we're going to do some stretching basics, not basics, stretching basics. Okay. So what is stretching? Stretching is, excuse me, stretching is a focus on lengthening your muscle fibers. Okay. So stretching is the only way for you to become more flexible. And improved flexibility means you are able to complete a full range of motion, or ROM, if you ever see that acronym in all caps, in whatever fitness literature you've got yourself reading into. Range of motion is what that stands for. But Improved flexibility means you are capable of putting your muscle through the entire range of motion. And a range of motion is like from the start to the finish. So from full stretched capability of the muscle to fully contracted capability of the muscle um, in every exercise you do. Increased flexibility means you have an increased range of movement. Sorry. Stretching also can prepare the muscles for activity. If you ever played sports, like that's the first thing everybody does. You go through a dynamic stretching routine with the team so that you can go throughout the rest of your activity and not worry about injury, and not worry about tearing something. Stretching also promotes blood flow, and by means of promoting blood flow, promotes recovery, which is essential. So that's a lot of the reason too people advocate for stretching after your workout. Increase the blood flow to the area, get the nutrients it needs to repair. Stretching reduces your injury risk because your muscles being warmed up and lengthened before you go into an exercise like running or sprinting. Um, Otherwise your muscles might still be tight, and if they're tight and then you go to stretch them really fast by sprinting, there's a risk there for tears and other problems. Stretching um, also it kind of pairs with mobility. It's different because we'll explain the difference between stretching and mobility here in a second. Mainly that stretching is focused on lengthening muscle fibers, and mobility is interested mainly in ensuring full mobility of certain joints. We'll explain the exact difference in a second. But what I'm trying to get at is that stretching basics leads to increased mobility as well, because like mobility is an exercise to prepare yourself for proper range of motion. But to get to the point where you can do that, you have to be flexible enough, right? So being flexible through stretching increases mobility, which improves stability. So that said, let's get into some types of stretching. There's dynamic stretching, dynamic stretching is basically just active. Oh, look at that! I'm covering that picture. It's basically just active, active movements. So if you've ever done let's say the Michael Phelps, right? He like flaps his arms like out and in before he swims. That's a dynamic stretch that stretches the shoulder and pectoral muscles, maybe some back as well. But the difference between a dynamic and a static stretch is that static just means you're holding the position. Dynamic means you're actively moving. So generally, dynamic stretching is better for pre-workout. So before you're going to go do something, you want to get warm, you want to stretch those muscles, but you don't want to sit there and just hold the position for stretching, because it's kind of the same thing as we just talked about, where if you don't stretch, then you run right into some intense movements. There's a risk for tears and stuff like that. So you want to be moving actively, get the blood flowing, stretching before you work out. And some examples of exercises you can use for dynamic stretching are leg swings, arm circles, lunges while twisting, torso twists, anything that requires you to move while stretching your muscles out. And remember, stretching is the lengthening of a muscle. Okay. Static stretching, generally better for post-workout. Once you're already pretty loose and limber, by static stretching, you can kind of press yourself slowly to be more extended. And that'd be better because you're obviously going to be able to stretch further once you're already warmed up and after the workout than you would in the beginning when you're still tight. So hamstring stretch, quad stretch, chest stretch, child's pose. You can search any of these up, exactly like the form, how to do them. These are just examples. But the active versus passive. So we're talking about basically the difference between dynamic and stretching. Again, that's just another way to say it. Active, you're moving. Passive, you're kind of not. The benefits of stretching kind of differ depending on the type. I think I've already hit on this enough. The benefits for dynamic is it warms you up, gets blood flow moving. Benefits of static puts you in that's kind of where you work on the flexibility, right? So you're stretching the muscles beyond the normal range that they operate on a daily basis, so that they can then be used to that and not be so tight all the time. Like I said, you can Google any of these types of exercises, but just know from this slide, all we really need to know is dynamic, active, do it pre-workout, static, is holding position, do it post-workout. There you go. Mobility and joint health. All right, so we're moving away a little bit from stretching now into mobility. So here's the difference I was going to say. Stretching, like we said, is a focus on lengthening the muscles. Mobility is focused on increasing your range of motion for movement. Okay. So the mobility is also a basis for stability and movement. So all the joints, if you think about like the muscles are what require your bones to move and to move your body around, right? But they hinge and they attach to joints in your body. So it'd be intuitive just to think that if I wanted better movement for myself, like yeah, you got to be stronger and bigger, leaner, whatever it is your goal is. But all of those kind of depend on the movement of your joints. And so if you want to be overall strong and you want to be able to move better, move more smooth, move more weight, you got to focus on the stability of your joints as well. And that's what mobility is. So they're essential for loading the muscles your joints are. Increased mobility oftentimes equates to an improved posture and more efficient movement. And the difference, once again, from stretching, is mobility combines flexibility and strength to move through a full range of motion. So when we talk about stretching, we're trying to get to a point where you become more flexible. But mobility is combining that flexibility we gain from stretching and your strength from your muscles to move through a full range of motion for whatever exercise it is you're doing. So that's why that's important. Mobility, absolutely essential. Mobility is what allows you to properly go through the range of motion for whatever exercise you're doing. And even if it's not just exercise, though, like your daily tasks, think about, we talked about in lesson 1 or 2, I can't remember, about the daily tasks, I think 1, that would become easier if you were more fit, right? Part of that is mobility. Like if you have to bend over a lot in your day, or you're like always reaching up because you're on a ladder or something. So I know a lot of you guys are the blue collar types. Whatever it is you do, mobility is like it plays an essential role, right? Because if you can't, like if you like, just think about like wiping after you use the toilet, right? That's a lot of stretching and mobility tactics that like go into that as well. Like you don't think about that every day because you don't think about as you're doing something like that. Oh, I need to be more mobile in my shoulder so I can reach these things. But overall ability and capability increases with increased mobility, right? And mobility is a byproduct of stretching and strength training. So, that said, here's some mobility exercises you guys can look more into. Hip circles, improve range of motion in the hips. World's greatest stretch. I'm actually a big enjoyer, you could say, big proponent of the world's greatest stretch. That's a full body movement. That's mostly why I like it. And we have that in mobility because like parts of it you're actively like you're doing more static stretching, right? But it also if you just look up YouTube how to do the world's greatest stretch, it actually requires you to hold yourself in certain positions that work best for mobility. So there's also thoracic or thoracic, however you want to pronounce that, twists, spine and shoulder mobility, arm circles, working on the arm and shoulder mobility, ankle rocks, ankle mobility. So that last final tip there is my tip for you guys. If you're going to be working mobility, which I think you should weekly, right? It's not to say that you have to every day go work on your mobility stuff, but one way to incorporate mobility exercises that I find works for me is focus on the involved joints for a session in the gym. So if I'm going to go be doing a chest session, or I'm going to go bench press, I'm going to do some flies, I'm going to do whatever else. I will focus on shoulder mobility before the workout or after. Probably before, I would focus on some dynamic stretching to get the blood flow going in the shoulder, and then after the workout, do some static stuff. But the point of what I'm trying to say here is if you're gonna combine your training sessions with some mobility exercises, focus on the involved joints for a session, and that will help you doing some mobility stuff before you start lifting heavy. It'll help you to be nice and warm, nice and loose, nice and stable to continue to press through the rest of your workout. So we've covered why you should be focused a little bit on mobility and how stretching equates to mobility. So before we go into the next lesson, that's hopping right into weight training routines, regimes, stuff like that. Regimens, I should say. Regime is not the right word for that, but anyways, we want you guys to have a basal foundation for where you guys currently stand, what your strength is, and then also this gives you an idea. Body weight exercise kind of gives you an idea of where you need to work, right? So body weight exercising is basically a primer for actual weight training in the gym. Like we mentioned, Understand your current physical capabilities. Can you do a push-up? Can you do a pull-up? How many squats can you do by yourself? If you can't do very many, maybe you don't want to load up a ton of weight on a squat rack the first time you try, right? But it's just to create a basis to apply weight training. You want to build up your strength and stability that would be required to move weight effectively through, like we talked about, through the range of motions. You just want to set yourself up for proper form later. So, practicing doing push-ups, it kind of gives you an idea of like, oh yeah, I can feel that in my pecs, right? Or maybe if my arms are too flared, I'm feeling that only in my shoulders. Hey, maybe before I go and load myself up with more weight than a push-up would require, like on a bench press or something, I should fix my form, right? So like we talked last lesson about how trying things out and experience often leads to better knowledge. Well, it will lead to better knowledge, and it will lead to decisions about like what works for you and what doesn't. We talked about that last lesson, right? But now if you want to apply it to this, that's kind of why we're doing body weight exercises first. So we're not exactly we're not exactly prescribing a workout plan for each of you here, but these are just steps you can choose to take moving forward, just like the relationships advice is, just like mindset training is, just like financial training and literacy is going to be soon too, once you've completed stage 3. These are all like information that, Caleb and I know to be true for ourselves and know to work because it works for a lot of people. Tried and true, routines here, but it's up to you guys to decide how you implement this, right? So what I'm offering is if you have no experience in the gym, start out with some bodyweight exercises like the following on the next slide and get yourselves prepared for a point where you can actually start loading more weight on your muscles, okay? So what does that look like? Some examples could be the core bodyweight exercises. So bodyweight exercises that are most common, that are going to work all of the major muscle groups, starting out with push-ups, working your chest, shoulders, triceps, helps build upper body strength. Squats, air squats, your quads, your glutes, your core. Develop lower body strength, planks, core stability. We talked about that in our muscle mechanics lesson. Lunges, legs, balance and coordination, that's a huge one. Being able to be strong enough on one leg to support the weight of your whole body. And then pull-ups, working the back and biceps to build upper body strength. If you don't have a pull-up bar, walk to a park. That's the best thing I can say. Go find one, dude. But even if you don't do pull-ups, do something. Do push-ups every day. Wake up, try your push-ups, try your squats, try each of these. Look into other options for bodyweight exercises, especially in these phases. Like maybe you got to wait. You know that you want to start getting a gym membership, and you're excited to after next lesson when we talk about regimens, but you got to wait for the next paycheck, something like that. In the meantime, don't waste your time. Go and try. Even if you don't end up getting a membership in general, and you don't start weight training, you just decide, I'm just going to do some other thing I'm interested in. You can keep yourself like prepared and decently fit by just doing these bodyweight exercises, right? So look into that. Try these bodyweight exercises. Create a foundation for yourself. Understand what it feels like to work certain muscle groups, and then we're going to move on to some progression. Oh, let me go back. Putting it together, everything we learned. Okay, injury is counterproductive. Do what you can to prevent it. When I say it's counterproductive, if you're going to take 5 steps forward by doing great in the gym, eating well, sleeping well, drinking a lot of water, training very intense, and you get injured, 5 steps forward equals like 10 steps back. If you're training improperly, right? And then it leads to injury. So what is it we do to prevent injury? Well, we practice our dynamic and static stretching so that we can apply stretching to mobility. And then we combine flexibility from the stretching with our strength training for mobility. We get ourselves mobile, we get ourselves stable, we get our joints working as they're supposed to be by means of these concepts. So putting it all together again, utilize stretching techniques pre-post workout. And I have active rest here on mobility and stretching on those second and third points because, first let me talk. Second point, when I mentioned pre and post workout, stretching technique, like I said, before you work out, you want to be doing dynamic so that you can warm up and get loose. And then post workout, you want to do static so that you guys can even further lengthen the position of your muscles, right? And active rest, what I mean by that is on a day that so let's say you get set up with a fitness regimen, you're weight training, you're doing some cardio stuff, and every once in a while you're going to need a rest day, right? Because you can't just continuously push yourself with a high level of intensity every day and not expect to decline until you let your body fix itself, reset, rest, rebuild, recover. So on a rest day, there's this concept we like to call called active rest, which means on a rest day, you're not just going to lay in your bed all day, but rather you're going to do something in the day, whether it's super, super light cardio, like you're just going to go for a walk, right? 20, 30-minute walk. Maybe play some sports with your family. Maybe do something with your kids if you've got kids. Go for a bike ride. Something to keep yourself moving and keep blood flowing and keep your mind functioning properly, right? But why I write that down next to utilize stretching techniques and then implement mobility exercises is because that's also an option for you on your active rest days. Like let's say you want to go for a 20-minute walk, come back, 10 minutes, do some stretching stuff, work mobility, and you can call that your active rest day. So you're not actually pushing your muscles very difficult. You're not actually going any crazy on your normal routine, but you're getting some work in and you're creating positive progress, right, by developing your mobility. So, and then we talked about the third point, I kind of already hit it on it, but implement mobility exercises. Ideally, you're working mobility weekly to increase your range of motion, ability, and stability. Overall, for either one, you're going to start small, gradually work up, and that kind of, the last 2 points kind of go into the body weight training thing, where we're going to have you guys, we're advising you all, before we start getting into the weight training stuff, start small. Start with just being able to move your body around in a way that it should be able to. If you fall down, you should be able to get yourself back up. If you're hanging off the side of a cliff, you should work to be able to get yourself back up. You should work to be able to take care of yourself and those around you before you start, progressively overloading to now you're strong enough to be doing that, and that's too easy. You're going to end up having to do like 50 push-ups to feel a pump. So now, okay, let's add some weight on that. And the way you do that is by weight training. But remember, you need to start small, consistently and gradually work up. Build a basis or good habits for your training in these body weight things, in this range of motion thing. Take the information we've taught you so far, apply it while you're working out. Understand like, okay, this muscle moves this way. Here's some targeting training movements that I can do for that. Let's try that with our body weight. Well, it feels pretty good. Now let's get ready and go gear up in the gym, put some extra weight on, and we'll progress from there. So that said, that's what it looks like to put it all together. Excited to teach you guys about training regimens the next lesson. With that, take everything we've learned, reflect, write down questions you have in the chat, take notes, and we will see you for lesson 6.